Okay, it's 9 o'clock. We're going to officially call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. Let me know for the record that there's an official copy of the Open Meetings Act on the north wall of the chambers if anybody wants to see that. We also note that there's an automatic defibrillator here somewhere in the room if somebody needs that by chance. With that, we will call to order the Douglas County Board of Equalization meeting. Roll call.
Commissioner Boyle, here. Commissioner Kavanaugh, here. Commissioner Duda, here. Mr. Kraft, Commissioner Morgan, Chair Rogers,
here.
And Commissioner Borgeson is absent today.
Item A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, June 27, 2017. Item B, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, July 18, 2017 as the date for hearing and certified assessments on reflecting the addition and omitted property to the tax rolls for increased value on property. What's the will of the board? There's a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, please vote.
Motion passes, all commissioners present voting yes.
Item C is citizens' comments. Is this an opportunity for anybody in the audience that wants to speak to any item not officially listed on the Board of Equalization's agenda? If it's a Board of Equalization related matter, again, are there any citizens' comments at this time? Are there any citizens' comments? There are none. Resolutions. Item D, denial of 2017 permissible exemption application. Item E, denial of personal property permission exemptions. For the record, to the board, there has been a request by one of the three parties involved to lay this over. There are two parties here, but there has been a request to lay this over. The question is, what's the will of the board in regards to the layover and how long?
I'd say
Commissioner Moore.
a week, if that's acceptable to others. Is that okay, and get this behind us sooner
Is that a
rather than
motion?
later? That'll be a motion.
Is okay?
I'd like to split the question.
Okay, right now there's a motion to hold them all over. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
There's a second. There's motion to second. Anyone wants to speak on it?
Yes, Commissioner. Howard Hahn, QTAC Rock, 1650 Farnham. We're here. I'm here with my partner Buck Heim for the Habitat for Humanity. We have never received notice that there was any thought of laying this over, and I think this is, I don't know if this is the third time we've been here or the fourth time we've been here, but you know, if I were running my meter on an hourly basis, I think this was a heck of a deal. The fact is, I'm not. Okay, so I guess we would like, and we have given Mr. Goodwillie some additional materials, and if Mr. Goodwillie did not have an objection, we would just as soon have the board hear the matter.
My desk is upside down. I don't know who sat here yesterday, but it must have been. Okay, you ready? I mean, I can understand we talked about laying these over, but refresh my memory. What is the purpose of this? Are we going to further discuss our position, or can we do that in public, or should we take a moment to go in the back room and talk about it, or what's the deal? Pardon me?
I've heard of no other discussion other than what's going on, so, but there's just been requests.
It's my impression that the board pretty much has figured out what we're going to do, I think. I just soon respect Mr. Hahn's time. He's been very generous in doing pro bono work for the association, so I don't have a problem with voting today at all, unless there's some compelling reason why we need to wait, because it's going to be 2 weeks, isn't it?
No, it'll be a week. We meet next week.
Okay.
Commissioner Moore.
That'd be my thought too. Now let me see if Teresa has any comments for us. I'm not sure who requested laying it over, and it doesn't matter, but if we needed to take them all up, or we just, because it was requested by one of the groups, why don't we go ahead and make the motion on maybe Mr. Hahn's group, Habitat for Humanity, and get that behind us? But I yield to our county attorney person, Teresa.
Well, right now, there's a motion to take them all, unless now Commissioner Kraft had I'm assuming you want a substitute motion?
Yes.
Substitute motion, yes.
Okay, you want to make that?
Yes. I make a substitute motion that we split the question
Okay.
and vote on the goodwill issue separate.
Is there a
At a
second
later
for that?
date.
I'll second that.
There's a second for that. Okay. Teresa?
Teresa, your county attorney's office. It came to my attention, and I responded late yesterday. Goodwill was the only one that I'm aware of that has made a motion to continue. It's my understanding they've provided additional information to the assessor's office, and the assessor's office will need time to review that additional information. And so I have no objection to laying over Goodwill. That is what I told them via email yesterday. I have no objection to that, and the board can either lay it over to the 18th or August 1st. We do not meet on the 25th.
Okay.
And you can split the question if you so desire.
Well, it's a motion to split right now. Mr. Goodwill?
Yes, Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor, Register of Deeds Office. Ms. Urick is just about there. We haven't gotten any of the materials Goodwill has told us they were going to provide. And so I think they want to lay it over to give us a chance to review them, to make some, determine if there was any additional information that might change our recommendation. So, yeah, if nothing else, Goodwill probably needs to be split out. I would also say if you want to take up the other organizations today, there are 3 parcels from Omaha Small Business Network that are kind of in the middle of this. So you may want to treat them a little bit differently than either Habitat or Salvation Army, simply because those 3 parcels aren't being used for really anything that has a colorable charitable purpose.
Well, right now, there's a motion to separate, and if that's the case, we will, and if this motion passes, we'll separate those 2 out and take OSB and separate. There's the motion to separate those out. So right now, seeing no further question, the motion on the floor is to separate the Salvation Army and Habitat out. No further questions.
What are we doing with Omaha Small Business?
We're going to do that separate. The question right now is to separate Salvation Army and Habitat out.
I got you.
If this passes, then I'll ask for a separate motion to just do OSB. So, no discussion with that. We're voting on the motion for Salvation Army and Habitat. Please vote. Okay.
Commissioner Boyle.
Having a hard time. Got it?
Motion passes, all commissioners present voting yes.
What's the will of the board? We're now going to take, what's the will of the board on the Salvation Army and Habitat for Humanity?
I make a motion that we grant the exemption requested by the organizations.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
For Habitat and Salvation Army.
Perfect.
And Commissioner Kraft is seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
One moment, please. Okay, thank you.
Turn off your meter, Howard.
Commissioner Cap. Motion passes, all commissioners present voting yes.
Okay. There you all are? All right.
Thank you very much.
We'll now take the items that are there listed, which are the Omaha Small Business Network properties. What's the will of the board on action on that item?
Well, excuse me. My light won't come on.
If you can't, well, Commissioner Moore, while you're going, I'm going to abstain on this because I am on the board, but the board, the organization is fine with these because they are where Mr. Goodwill is saying, so the organization is not disputing it.
Okay, my box isn't working here. I would like to speak.
Go with it.
I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about why they are not, their property's not being used for a charitable purpose. I'm curious because we've had some fine lines on some property occasionally. I'm
Sure.
thinking of a fraternal organization that was building something and all they had to do was meet once on the property and they got their exemption.
Well, that's a fair question. There are three essentially bays side by side, each of which have.
Excuse me, may I ask, is there anyone here from that organization?
No.
Okay, excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, not a problem. There are three bays, storefronts essentially side by side.
Can I have are the locations on 23rd? No, see, where are they?
They're about halfway down the original list. 2522 North 24th, 2518 North 24th, and 2516 North 24th.
Okay.
They're essentially all storefronts that are separate parcels. Two of them are completely vacant. Haven't had, well, one hasn't had anybody in it in quite a long time. The other one, second one temporarily had I think a candidate's campaign headquarters in it, is currently not being used for anything that amounts to a charitable purpose. And the third one is being leased to a for-profit retail store that is ongoing.
Could I ask you?
To a private for-profit party.
Okay. Could I ask you on each individual property what the valuation is and what taxes would be produced?
I'm sorry, sir, I don't have that with me today.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask that is that I don't want to make that kind of a decision without knowing, if the valuation is $200 or if it's $200,000. This is a group that is working very hard to accomplish some good things on the north side, and I don't want to, without total information, withdraw their valuation that could plunge them into closing. I think it's a real issue to me, and I think I would need that information. I'm not trying to stall this, but I need that information, and I also would like to have the parties here to tell us what this kind of a change would do to their operations. It's a big deal to me. This goes right in line with the other ones. They're providing a social service that others are not.
So is your motion to lay over that and Goodwill for a week?
Yes, but I'm not sure. Why are we laying over Goodwill? I'd like to vote on that too.
They've asked for it.
Oh, they have. Okay, in that case. And I would like, can we notify them and ask them to have a representative here?
OSBN?
For the business network?
Okay.
Great, thank you. I'll do that.
There's a
Make that
motion to lay over OSBN and Goodwill. Is there a second?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there's a second. Seeing no discussion, please vote. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Duda.
I apologize. Not a big deal. I don't see why we're laying over the Omaha Small Business Network. If they are, they're being used for a clearly taxable purpose. They have said they understand it, they get it, but we're not sure we're going to do it anyway. This is a slam dunk. It's not being used for exempt purposes. It ought to be taxed. We ought to just do it. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Well, there's a motion and a second by Kavanaugh, but I'm sorry, if there's that information, if Commissioner Duda is correct, and I believe he is there some indication that they don't care if they lose their valuation? Do you know, Chris?
Yeah. Basically, they don't dispute the ruling. It's the organization is not a typical social service nonprofit because it provides business loans. It's kind of entrepreneurial to help start up. So the company's not disputing that. It's used to generate a profit. It's not used. The people that are renting it out are not social service organizations. They're for-profit companies.
So is this kind of like the next step after the Business and Technology Center at 24th and Lake? That
yeah, when you leave out of there, you can go across the street, kind of to incubate out and across. They've had those for years, and my understanding that's been the issue. So they're not disputing it. They're I don't know. I'm not using the exact language, but they're for-profit companies in the space. And
right.
I'm assuming if there were anybody else doing it, we would do that. So that's why they're with that.
No, and in fact, the space they own back across the street, they're much larger complex. That's partially exempt and partially taxable. They use some of it. they lease it to some nonprofits that use pieces of it, and they also lease to various for-profit entities. And so I think this organization kind of understands the notion that when you're leasing your property and it's being used for a for-profit entity, it comes on the tax roll. If they turned around and began leasing it to a social service organization or even a church or some other kind of entity that was using it for a religious educational or religious charitable or educational purpose, our recommendation would be different.
Well, I guess, what gets me is that, where you talk about entrepreneurs and trying to help people start up and all the rest of it, and the first thing we do is say, okay, now that you got this space, good luck, and by the way, now you're going to have to start paying taxes. That's one of the first things that starts off before they can get up on their feet. Maybe I'm wrong about it, and apparently I'm in the minority, which isn't unusual. But I'll yield to the board, I guess. But I still have questions about their viability, and the work that they're doing is valuable. Creating jobs, I assume, and there must be some way to honor their work.
Yeah, if the state wanted to pass a law, we take it, but in good standing.
Okay.
We ain't got a lot of standing on it. So,
Then-
so the board would have to agree to right now release this motion on the floor, and we'd have to make some new motions. So I'm
Okay.
assuming nobody's saying we can do that by consent.
If I'll withdraw my motion and ask Mr. Kavanaugh to withdraw his second.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve the Omaha Small Business Network as recommended. Is there a motion?
By the
somewhere?
assessor, right.
Is there a motion?
I'll make it.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Boyle, motion, second, Commissioner Kraft. Seeing no discussion? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Kavanaugh. I'm up.
Okay, this is just on the Omaha Small Business.
Just on the OSB.
Okay. And Mr. Goodwill, your recommendation is that we do not grant this exemption, is that right?
Right. Actually, it's better stated affirmatively. We are recommending removal or denial of the exemption, and it's because technically, when an organization gets its exemption in years divisible by 4, as long as they continue to file the annual reaffirmation form, they retain the exemption unless the assessor or county board take a second look at it in a subsequent year. So so what your motion would be, if this is where you're going to go, would be to deny the exemption for Omaha Small Business Network on those 3 parcels only.
Does the clerk note that?
Yes.
Okay. You done, Commissioner Kavanaugh?
So is that the motion that
Yeah.
we do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyle?
I do have a question, though, and I'd like to ask you if you could follow up on the question I had about what is the valuation of these
Sure.
pieces of property, and also what kind of tax money they produce. I think it's kind of ironic when we grant TIFs in the multi-millions, but when it comes to 3 little offices on North 24th Street, we beat them to death. I just really am bothered by this, but that's the way life is, I guess. I don't like it.
See no further discussion. There's a motion and second. Please vote.
The motion passes. There was a commissioner voting no.
Okay.
Commissioner made the motion.
That was Commissioner Boyle.
I'd like to entertain a motion then to lay over goodwill for 1 week.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Okay. Commissioner Boyle?
And they asked for this, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is to lay over the goodwill item for 1 week. Please vote.
Motion passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
Okay. We
Thank you, Mr.
have
Goodwill.
now,
Thank you.
item F, approving application for tax exemptions on motor vehicles recommended for approval by the county treasurer. What's the will of the board?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion, there's a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Oops.
Push the wrong button. Here we go.
Motion passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
No need for executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second? Third?
Motion is second to adjourn. Please vote.
Motion passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
We'll now call to order the Douglas County Board of Corrections meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh? Commissioner Duda? Here. Commissioner Kraft? Here. Commissioner Morgan? Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
And Commissioner Borgeson is absent.
Item 1, approval of the minutes of the Board of Corrections meeting held Tuesday, June 13th, 2017.
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Please vote.
Commissioner Kavanaugh? Motion passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
Item 2 is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for anybody from the public to address a Board of Corrections item that is not officially listed on the Douglas County Board of Corrections agenda. Are there any citizens' comments at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3 and the report from the Director of Corrections. The Deputy Director, Director Hubbard, is here to present.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I believe you got your handouts hopefully last week. I'll kind of go through this as efficient as I can. In enclosure 1 talks about the administrative services. We entered the fiscal 2016-17 year under budget, approximately $168,000. In enclosure 2, community corrections in-house. The new Century Art Guild building began providing therapeutic art services to the veterans community in June. A little bit about the 24/7 alcohol sobriety program. We made presentations to the Douglas County court judges regarding addition of drug testing protocols for the 24/7. Hoping to have that take off sometime September 1st. Have you had a summary or a brief on those, the drug testing?
No.
Would you like to hear just a short brief?
Please.
Mike?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Michael Myers, the Community Corrections Manager for the Department of Corrections. We've been talking about the addition of drug testing to the 24/7 sobriety program for some time, and we're moving that forward. The program is now in its 3rd year, and it has been only alcohol monitoring thus far, and it's been quite successful at that, as the statistics bear out, both compliance-wise and with recidivism, at least in the early going. We are, in response to some changes in risks that are affecting all of us, in 2015, drugged driving fatalities actually surpassed alcohol-related fatalities. And so there is a bigger push to address that public safety matter. So we are going to be adding drug testing to the 24/7 program. We will be doing that using some methods that are pretty efficient and won't increase staffing. We are not going to collect urine samples from people because that does create need for additional staff and other logistical issues to deal with. We now can do a rapid instant drug test just using saliva, just a swab, as well as we're also going to use patches that are tamper evident that individuals will wear for up to 2 weeks at a time, and then we send that patch in for drug testing for analysis at a lab. So we'll be testing for about a half a dozen of the most common illicit substances on the streets, and be running there'll be some differences in terms of the sanctions and so forth, because these are illegal drugs compared to alcohol, which is technically legal for everybody else, but not for the individuals on the program. So the sanctions are a little bit different, but we do hope to get that started prior to September 1st. We have a few more meetings with other local criminal justice stakeholders that will occur over the next couple of weeks, some modifications to some court orders and so forth to get into place, and then hopefully have that ready to go in about 6 weeks.
Commissioner Kraft.
Do we have an estimate under the current program, before we do the enhanced drug testing, of how much this process, the 24/7, has saved the county in dollars?
I don't have that. We could probably dig into that and generate an estimate for you based upon bed days that are saved for
Sure.
people who are out on bond.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
An estimate would be excellent. And I'd like to have an idea of the anticipated savings on the enhancement.
Absolutely.
This way the public will know.
Correct. And just as a reminder for everyone here and for the public, that this program does not use Douglas County tax dollars to operate. It is funded by participant fees, and and any time that the fees aren't sufficient, there's a grant from the Office of Highway Safety which makes up the difference.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Just a comment, I think probably the value to the community is getting people who have drinking problems off the road, because they come in the morning and night and everything, and so it's pretty tight program, and just a terrific one. I'm curious, will most drugs, including meth and so forth, be able to be detected with this patch?
Correct, yes.
Of course, meth is probably pretty obvious when they come in, isn't it? Unfortunately for them. Okay, well, I think that's great. I'm really glad to hear your responsive, and I'm most interested in what was talked about earlier about the judges getting more involved in, because that's critical for them to sentence people to this
Absolutely.
sanction.
Those were the first folks who we spoke to when we had this idea.
Great, that's good. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Duda.
Thank you. Very interesting direction to go with the 24/7. And now you're going out on your own, I assume. I mean, the 24/7 we kind of copied from Sioux Falls, from Minnehaha County, but now we're venturing out into new territory. My question is, these costs are covered by the client fees as they come in. What will this do to the drug testing costs, to the client fees? How will the finances be impacted?
Sure. We have some tentative fees that we've, again, we're still meeting with all of the stakeholders to finalize everything, but we won't have to test, because of the nature of the metabolism of drugs in somebody's body compared to alcohol, we won't have to test them twice a day.
Okay.
You know, it may be variable based upon the person's use history, the substance that they're most dependent on. It could be as often, using the saliva method, as often as twice a week, or it may be less frequent than that. The patches, like I said, you will use, they last for 2 weeks, and then you test them, so you're probably using 2 per month for people who we select for that protocol.
Okay.
Tentatively, the saliva testing, we're looking to have a $10 fee associated with that to cover our costs of the materials, the testing supplies, and our staffing costs. And the patches will be $40, but that, again, you're only doing those once to twice a month.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike, let me ask you just one. Who's in the pilot? You say it's a pilot. Who is just individuals, or is it certain organizations like?
It's just we're working with the judges and I have meetings with the public defender, county attorney, city prosecutor to nail down which class of offenses that we want to add to this. Basically, similar to how we started with 24/7, was we just picked a certain range of offenses that were eligible for the program. We intentionally wanted to start 24/7 small to make sure that we had our ducks in a row and our procedures down before we got overwhelmed with larger numbers. And we'll take the same approach to this as well. So we'll intentionally start with hopefully, a handful of people, make sure we're doing it right, make sure that everything is working as we anticipate that it will, and then we'll talk about expansion from there.
Okay. Any more questions? Appreciate it. Look forward to the updates.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. The 24/7 sobriety had 15 new admissions. So far, this last month, 3,250 breath tests were completed. 10 were positive for alcohol use. We had 11 no-shows, but the overall compliance rate is still high. It's at 99.4%. Also had 30 individuals on SCRAM, 644 days. The compliance rate there is 99.7%. Work release, 44 individuals were admitted. They donated 923 hours of community service to various public and private charitable organizations. House arrest, 63 individuals, 360 hours of community service were donated by those clients. 33 individuals admitted to RAP. One individual achieved GED while in RAP, so that's a good thing there. And 78 individuals were admitted to corrections programs in the jail, and 34 individuals were referred for priority prosecution through the pretrial services. And overall, 458 bed days were saved, so that's good money there for tax dollars. 344 individuals placed on pretrial release, 1,129 individuals managed on pretrial release. On enclosure 3, we have the audit coming up this year, so we're still gathering the information, the files, making sure they're all in order. Everything's smooth right now. It's going as anticipated, so we shouldn't have any issues there. Enclosure 4, personnel, and the start date for the next new hire class, we had one start just July 10th. We just released 7 folks to the shifts, so that's going to help reduce some of the overtime. So the new classes started on the 10th. There's approximately 13 in there. Right now we're in the process of reviewing personnel applications that have gone through human resources. They've tested, so we're setting up interviews now. I know I went through at least 25 or 30 of those, so we have quite a big pool that we're going through right now. Enclosure 5 admissions, 1,689 for the month of June. 1,676 were released, and the high count was 1,279. I just want to let you know, as of Monday, we were at 1,328 inmates in the jail. We're up there. So this morning I looked at the count. I believe it was 1,312. So we're busting at the seams. But what I'd like you to look at is, if you start at page 1 and go back to page 6, there's a graph back there that actually shows the pretrial detaining. And if you look from June of 2016, which is the blue bar, and I'll wait till you get those pages if you have them.
Let's get page 6.
Yep, page 6 if you count from the first page back. And if you look at June there, the second bar to the right on each one of those bar graphs, you see that blue starting to increase. And as you go through July, August, September, October, November, December of 2016, they stay high. That's our pretrial population. And then when you go page 6, it'll look, Commissioner, it'll right there. The little colorful stuff. Page 6. From the beginning of the book, just count 6 pages over. I see these aren't numbered. I have to do something like that.
Okay, here it is. It's under population history. Under population history.
Yeah, they're supposed to be numbered.
Yeah, I don't see a number on my book.
We don't see a number either. That's my problem. Okay, keep talking.
We can't show that on the screen for the people that are here too, darn it.
Still don't see it, but that's okay. I'll just listen.
There we go.
Can you make that bigger so people can see it? Thanks.
There we go. Okay, if we look at June, this bar, this blue bar right here, excuse me, I guess I need a mic over here. If we look at this blue bar right here that I'm pointing at in June, you see how it starts to increase compared to May. And as that increases, that's the population of pretrial inmates. July, spiking. August, spiking. September, the same. October, November, December. That's all 2016. And you go over to the last bar in January, that indicates 2017 pretrial population. You see that it's up still. Has a little dip in April and May, but it's back up again. So it's increasing. And that's one of the reasons why we're having a big spike in our population. So, and based on the different charges, I know the directors talked to the prosecutor's office and a few of the attorneys and the judges, and a lot of those cases that are coming in are related to drug cases, so they're held over a lot longer before they even go to through the court system. So I just want to kind of share that with you to show why our counts are high. And again, as I indicated, felony pretrial population increased, misdemeanors same, female population, we have 3 housing units open. We had a high of 182 females last month alone, and that's just unreal. Enclosure 6, the medical intake screens 1,339, H&Ps 467, and discharge referrals 571. That's good. On the mental health side, psychiatric assessments, there were 62 completed, mental health assessments 78, mental health infirmary placements 54, referrals to community-based mental health services, outpatient psychiatric and medication management, there were 17 individuals.
Say, Mr. Hubbard, what page are you
Sir.
on?
Oh, I jumped back.
He's in the summary.
I'm back in the front part of the summary.
Okay, so you're reading from something?
Third page.
Third
Yeah.
page of the total beginning, huh?
Yeah, I'm going to make sure we get these numbers.
Okay, referrals to community-based, let's see. It's after, this is where you are? Is that where you are?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry about that. Mental health and co-occurring disorder treatment programs, 235 individuals were involved with that. Mental health therapy, 6 individuals, and long-term psychiatric facilities, 3 of those were placed. I don't have anything else.
You got a question from Commissioner Kavanaugh? Or is this old?
This is unrelated directly to the report, but I was just going to inquire whether or not you and the director have had an opportunity to review the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget requests that we're going to discuss later here today.
I have seen it, yeah, we've sat down several times and went through it.
And any comment, recommendation?
Well, obviously, we're talking about the corrections budget, is definitely an increase.
That's correct. This is the corrections report.
Right.
We're talking about the corrections
It's an
budget.
increase.
Right.
But a lot of that's due to the increase in inmate population. You need bodies to cover those areas, and what we've closed down before, projected in the past, hasn't quite worked out in the last year and a half. So with that in mind and the population increasing, staffing has to increase. We're just full, and that's the problem. And a lot of the increase is driven by overtime. If you run with staff shortages, there's spikes there. People getting burned out and trying to keep up with just the hiring alone itself. And it's tough out there, not just our organization, but other facilities, law enforcement, I'm sure you're all aware. I would like to be optimistic in saying that if we get the right amount of people on there and we get enough clients, inmates, into outside programs or released, or the police department, the sheriff's department, which they continually do right now, cite and release, and maybe that increases, then I think the money that we're asking or that we're talking about will come down. But those are getting all the stars to align, you know, and that's the problem right now. This population is just busting at the seams. I mean, we're looking at 100 more people to 150 more people in the last year and a half, and those are housing units. I mean, 64 bed units that we originally closed saved roughly 5.7 personnel to operate in a 24/7 environment. But when you start opening that up and you do 3 of those, you're looking at 16 and a half bodies without considering, you know, the fluctuation with inmates. I mean, we have to hire by what we have. So what we predicted in the past just kind of blew up in our face.
Right, so the budget request from your department to the board is for an increase of what percentage?
I don't know the percentage. I think it was from 30, and correct me if I'm right or wrong here, I believe it was from 33, 34 million up to 39 million.
All right.
Well, most of that will go to personnel costs.
Personnel costs.
Sure.
New people,
Yes.
adding people.
Yes.
And approximately how many?
Well, I think we were at 3.5 closed, and right now we're full. So, off the top of my head, you would look at roughly 21 above what I think we're authorized right now for 423.
Okay.
So an increase above that.
You know, we appreciate, a lot of this is beyond your control. I mean, you know, you don't have any control over how many people are coming through your door.
We don't, and we have to meet the needs that
Exactly.
hit
You
our
do an
door.
important job, and you know, we're confident that you do it well. One other question, this is unrelated to that. The public safety bond that was approved last fall
Yes.
is in place now, and we are progressing with the construction
Yes.
at the Douglas County Correctional Center. How's that going?
That's going to begin, it was backed up to August 21st. So that is the projected start date. We haven't heard anything different off of that in the last 2 weeks. So we have a plan in place, what we're going to attack first in the buildings. And obviously, one of them is going to be the gym, the lighting, the doors for security purposes, and then we'll filter folks in there based on classification to close down a unit that they're going to work on and refurbish. You know, with the glass and the lighting and the plumbing. So we have a plan in place. We think it's going to work. We used the gym before when we were going to the floors, getting the inmates off the floors. There was issues with the doors because they're gymnasium doors. You can get out, can't get in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need an opposite effect when we put an officer in there. And the lights were another issue. They're either on or off. We need something that controls half that so people can sleep and get some rest. So we have a plan.
Okay, so if I hear you correctly, you're on time and on budget on this project.
Yes.
Very
Yep.
good. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yes, I'd like to add a couple of comments too. I think a lot of the diversion programs that really have been put in place probably in the last 6 years or so with day reporting, which is, I don't know what it's called, if that's day reporting now, whatever, but the building to the north of the correction facility is filled with people who are not spending the night in our jail. They come and go, and as alcohol, for example, what we just heard from Mike, the alcohol testing program has been a tremendous help in keeping people out of our facility. Also, the director and Mr. Hubbard are very aware of the need to get people out of there as quickly as possible, and so they do have a fast-track prosecution program, which is extremely beneficial, and they work very closely with the county attorney on accelerating those charges and getting people out. Also, we have, and I don't know the status of this yet, but the social workers that come in and try to break the chain of individuals who are leaving, who are affectionately called frequent flyers, who come back time after time and have a lot of problems with chemical and other dependencies, and in many cases are homeless, and a lot of them are veterans, and so we work very closely with Francis House and others to try to break that chain, and these social workers are trying to break the chain as well. It's very difficult. Another thing that really affects us tremendously, and I'll ask you to make a comment as best you can about the turnover in personnel. I remember we had a pretty large class that came in, and it wasn't 6 months later that we had lost a majority of them, I believe, to the Omaha Police Department. They came in and recruited. So they took our, and maybe the sheriff's office too, I don't know. But anyway, but we have other outside agencies coming in and recruiting. And so that's why we're in a constant state of training and trying to refill those positions. It really makes life more difficult. And of course, the criminal justice area, all of the supplemental budget allocations were made to offices and divisions that are associated with criminal justice, from the county attorney to corrections to the public defender, the whole thing. I mean, my recollection is that all of them were related to criminal justice, which continues to take so much of our budget, but it has to. We have no choice. You know, and maybe one of the things we want to think about, and I'm not sure that I should spring this, but I will. Sarpy County enjoys a diversion program, as you know, as a practicing attorney, a diversion program with people who are first offenders with alcohol and so forth, and shoplifting and other sorts of things, because the county attorney has the authority to do that. And maybe we should open talks with our county attorney and say, would this be possible in Douglas County? Would it benefit the facility? Would it take first-time offenders out of that, you know, out of serving jail time for a first offense or whatever it may be? And I'm not sure to what extent we do. I'm not up to speed on that, so it's something we need to talk about. But that could be a possibility as well. I think it's, you know, it is one of the, your operations are very expensive operations, but you're doing just about everything I think you can with cutting-edge approaches. I do have one final question. There was a recent article in the World Herald, very well written, about the kind of problems that the Omaha Police particularly, but other law enforcement agencies as well, have to put up with people, have to work with people who are in distress mentally. And I know that there have been cases where you've had rescue squads pull into your facility with a man strapped down, and you're expected to take him. And that was kind of a battle, and I understand you didn't do it because it doesn't belong there. But you interact quite a bit, obviously, with law enforcement on people suffering from mental illness. Do you want to make a couple comments about that? I mean, what do you do? We have so many people in our facility that are suffering from mental illness. We keep talking about it, but you know, I think we need to do something pretty quickly. But what's your quick take on that? I mean, as something else to try to save money and to serve people better?
Well, it's old news, but everybody knows the mental health facilities shut down locally and pretty much statewide. So, and I know Mark gets up here and talks about our facility being the largest mental health institute, and you know that's true. One of the things we do is we're constantly training staff. We're bringing new innovative ideas in. We're looking for best practices that are out there, whether it's across the state or nationally, just to try to stay up with what's coming in the door. There's no place to put these people.
Right.
So they bring them to us. One of the pieces I'd like to see would be the state coming up with some money and opening up some of these places. I know I'm saying what everybody else would like to see. It's just not going to happen. I don't think it should be the burden on the counties themselves to do this, because it may not happen. It may happen, but there's just not enough support to do that. And when people's budgets are stressed, they start cutting what they can cut, and obviously we're in the predicament we're in now. So the hospitals can't hold them. After they get them so much stabilized, they'll bring them to us. I mean, we have some cases like you were talking about where they brought him in an ambulance, strapped down to a gurney, and said, here you go. That's how they wheeled him into the admissions area in the pre-book. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. That ain't happening. No clearance, but they didn't want him, and here you are. So, and he was a frequent flyer. He's been back since, but at least he wasn't on a gurney coming in. That's quite a transport. That was through the Omaha Police Department. Wayne, I just thought I'd let you know. Chief. So anyway, but
good way to cover.
I gotta make sure. But it was the Omaha Police Department. But things like that happen. I saw one yesterday coming in. and literally the bars on the police cruiser, you know, this guy's sticking his face out and he's screaming up at the skies, and obviously he was drug induced and he had some mental health issues, and just trying to go up to the police officer's cruiser and try to talk to the guy to kind of calm him down. He didn't see me, didn't hear me. He's just, this is what we get. And he came in. So, but back to your original question, yeah, it'd be nice to see the state kick in instead of coming up with laws and dumping more on us.
Well, and I want to emphasize too that no one, and certainly not me, I don't lay this problem at the door of the Omaha Police Department. They
I don't either.
On the street, and we need to figure out a way to give them some relief. I mean, the story was terrifically well written, and the people that work on it are really amazing people to try to talk people down and calm them down. So they need, you know, we need to figure out a way to help them
yeah, and this is no way against the Omaha Police Department. They have to get the people off the street.
That's right.
But when the hospitals refuse to take them and they just wave a wand and say, yeah, they're good to go, they have no place to take them. You go to some of these shelters, they can't do anything with this. I mean, you see an ambulance pulling up with somebody strapped in or the person yelling out, they're going to go back and do what they were doing. They're just going to leave that place. So they have to have a place to put them. We take them. Mark has open communication with Chief Schmatter all the time. Several meetings. I mean, they work well together. We all work well together. So it's just what's out there right now. It's a changing environment. We all know that. The last 7-8 years, my time in corrections, it just keeps climbing. Our population is so high with some sort of mental illness that it's just unbelievable. So
thank you.
Commissioner Morgan.
Following up on what Commissioner Boyle was talking about, and we've talked about it often here. First of all, I think there was a story in the paper in the last couple days about the state getting more involved in the mental health area and trying to look at some things, and some state senators, and we want to be sure we're all participating. The other thing is, you know, we've talked about it here, the hospitals have the tax exemption. You know, it may be worthwhile, Commissioner Boyle, at some point, and all of the commissioners, for us to have some discussion of how they can participate. You know, we talk about the pilot program payment in lieu of taxes. It seems like there's something that maybe should occur in that area, and maybe we could have someone from our staff even look at what some other states are doing in regard to that, because I know they have in other states that payment in lieu of taxes. And I think it's time that we really put some effort into that area, in my opinion, but I yield to the judgment of the majority of this board in that area and what we should step forward and do or not do.
You're absolutely right.
Okay. Let me say to the board, hopefully here in a couple of days, I'll be sending you all a letter from another role. I mentioned here the role that I have with what's called the Pretrial Justice Institute. And in respects to the ACLU report that happened earlier this year about pretrial, there's Director Foxhall has edited a little bit of this for me. There's a letter that we're going to send to I'm going to send to the Judge Havican in respects to the issue, to ask him if he considered being involved in what's called a 3 days count campaign. It's basically geared toward pretrial. The basic thing is saying 3 days that an inmate is there on pretrial has an effect on their livelihood, whether they're poor, or things of that sort. So just as this topic came up, if the state becomes involved in it, there's hopefully some technical assistance that probably can come through here.
Great.
And there's a couple of funders willing to work with us on it. We've worked with us on some other matters. So if the board sees that letter, that's what it is in conjunction for, and ask the state to consider it. So I just want to put everybody on notice. Any other questions for Director Hubbard? Seeing none, thank you.
Good job. We're going to have Mark send you back all the time.
He'd like that, probably, right? Thank you.
We have no need for executive session for corrections. Is there a motion to adjourn the Board of Corrections? There's a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Please vote.
Commissioner Kavanaugh and Commissioner Kraft. passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
I just delayed because I like to hear you say that.
That's right.
We'll now call the meeting of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners to order. Roll call.
Commissioner Boyle?
Here.
Commissioner Kavanaugh? Commissioner Duda? Here. Commissioner Kraft?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan? Chair Rogers?
Here.
And Commissioner Borgeson is absent.
Item A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, June 27, 2017. Item B, approval of claims submitted for payment processed through Tuesday, July 11, 2017. What's the will of the board?
Move approval of 1A and B.
There is a motion. Is there a
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Seeing
I'll
no-
be abstaining because there's a check written to my company.
Noted. Seeing no questions, please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioner Morgan abstained. All our commissioners voting yes.
We'll go to the consent agenda, which is 10 items. What's the will of the board regarding the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Seeing no questions, please vote.
Commissioner Duda. Motion passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
Item 4, citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on any item that is not officially listed on the Douglas County Board of Commissioner agenda. Are there any citizens' comments at this time? Seeing none, we'll go on to item 6, which is public hearing. The budget hearing and adoption of proposed 2017-18 Douglas County budget is the agenda item. We will now open the public hearing on the Douglas County 2017-2018 budget. Are there any comments on the budget? Yes. Oh, sorry. Will you come up, Commissioner Kavanaugh, you please address the...
Just real quickly, I'd like to note that, and I think we're all aware, the clerk is instituting a suggestion that we had from a citizen, Kathleen Miklas, who's here in the audience today, relative to making the votes more readily apparent to people who may have impairments and unable to watch the vote on a video. So the votes are being announced now, and I think that's a good move. I'd like to commend Kathy for being an active participant in our process and making a good suggestion. We want to be as inclusive and as transparent to all of our citizens, and taking into consideration that some people have visual or even hearing impairments. Making this a more accessible process is good for all of us. So, Kathy, I'd like to thank you on behalf of Douglas County for making that suggestion, and Dan Ash, I'd like to thank you for taking the initiative to institute it. Thanks, both of you.
It's a good one.
Please proceed.
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Doug Kagan, representing Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. In June, I distributed to you our issue paper and addendum regarding the new budget. Again, we appreciate county commissioners, officials, and staff for closely cooperating with our group during the budget process. Especially pleasing to us is no increase in the property tax levy and a decrease in the total budget. Now, I would like to mention various suggestions for budget cutting. Analyze all non-mandated services and eliminate or curtail these functions, such as the law library extension service, and lobby the legislature to end unfunded state mandates on counties. Also lobby the legislature to grant more autonomy to the most populous counties, thus increasing county commissioner authority to make budgetary decisions. Use private sector performance standards to evaluate cost and performance of county services. Install a monitoring process for use of all technologies such as cell phones, iPads, etc. Institute desk audits to analyze workloads for employees. Dispense with the public information officer. We believe that the staff can be the spokespersons for the county board. If intent on hiring one grant specialist, this specialist should replace department grant writers. Maintain pay raises at or below the inflation rate. Require employees to pay more of their health care insurance costs and fringe benefits, these costs continually straining the annual budget. End all longevity, specialty, and other added pay like step increases, special time off, and tuition payments. Peg pension benefits to base pay only. Require employees to pay at least 9.5% of their salary into the pension system. State patrol officers now pay 17%. Raise civilian employment retirement age to 60. Employees who retire earlier would earn drastically lower pension payments. Place high priority on HMA recommendations that reduce health center expenses. Its budget bleeding taxpayers $15 million annually now. End non-mandated long-term care services there funded by property taxes. Verify that clients and prisoners actually mentally ill when providing health services with incarceration. Offer services only in the English language. Continue to consolidate offices at 156th and West Maple Road to save money on leases. Utilize zero-based budgeting in all departments as recommended by the March 2016 County Strategy Development Update. Because the end of the fiscal year usually sees a deficit, set priorities during the initial budget planning phase. Inheritance tax revenue scheduled to drop by $1 million, a reason to use it only for its intended purpose. Merge the county fair with the Sarpy County Fair to offer a more rural flavor. We also have several revenue enhancement recommendations. Begin an initiative to reform state nonprofit statutes so that counties can levy in lieu of taxes or a percentage of property taxes on nonprofit entities. Hire junkyard dog collection agencies to retrieve owed fines, restitution, etc. Actively market services to adjacent government subdivisions like your crime lab. And determine that fees charged for county services pay for both time expended and cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle.
Doug, I'd like to tell you that I just asked Commissioner Morgan if he would support a meeting of the Finance Committee to go through each one of these proposals in detail, and he said yes, that he would. And so we'd like to schedule that when it makes some sense, and it doesn't have to be here in this building. It can be any place as long as it's open to the public. But you make some excellent suggestions. Some of them, of course, are controlled by the legislature and the governor, which you are well aware of, and others are controlled by labor negotiations and whether it's the pension or other things. And so it's not something we can just say change this. But we still need to respond to this, and they're excellent ideas, and try to come up with some answers. This reminds me of something I've mentioned before. Years ago, when Mayor Vase was faced with an increase in police salaries, it instituted the city sales tax, and that's what started all that, to raise more money to pay for salaries. And that was the Chamber of Commerce Task Force report that was put together. It gathered dust, and when I was elected, I took it off the shelf, and we started going through them one by one to try to do just exactly what I'm talking about. So I always enjoy when some of my good, friendly Democratic friends say to me, why are you working with these people? And I always say, very good common sense suggestions. So I personally appreciate it, and I'll let Commissioner Morgan speak for himself, but I'm looking forward to sitting down with you and listening and try to come to some solutions. Thank you.
Our team would like to sit down and work with you, and we can offer you more background material on each one of these.
Thank you.
And I want to add that some of my Republican friends want to know why I work with some Democrats in the county, and I tell them the same thing. They're doing a good job.
Thanks, Doug. You too.
Okay.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Doug. And we've had this discussion. I share Commissioner Boyle's view. There's no real Democrat or Republican way to do this, right? It's just the right way to do this. And we appreciate the input of you and your organization and other citizens coming forward, because we're all in this together, and working together we can make this better. So thank you. I do share, and Commissioner Boyle touched on this, some of your interest in making this a more readily available, transparent process, and maybe doing what Mike suggested relative to hearings outside of this particular hearing date would be a step in the right direction. We've done individual hearings in the past, and we've talked about maybe melding that with the process that we use today. I've heard from a couple of elected officials that they would like to make some suggestions, and I think we can incorporate those going forward to make it easier for people to understand the budget, and that includes people who are working on the budget, elected officials who contacted me and said, we're having difficulty appreciating where we are on our own budget. So, all of this is good. Discussion is good. The budget process is hugely important. I mean, anytime that we're spending $1/3 billion, I don't think that we can have too much discussion relative to how that should be done effectively. And so I commend you and your group for being vigilant observers of the budget process, and we appreciate your suggestions. And I looked over the report that you submitted with our budget report with interest, and I look forward to discussing some of those findings with you. I would hope that when you have the opportunity to talk to Governor Ricketts, you might have this discussion with him relative to his stated interest in property tax relief. Well, where the rubber hits the road is right here with this $380-odd million that we're spending, and we could use all the help that Governor Ricketts has expressed his interest in giving us in property tax relief. So please take every opportunity that you can, because, as you know, the county board is a creature of the state, and Governor Ricketts and the legislature write the rule books, and we execute that. So when you're having that discussion with them, the recommendations that you made relative to unfunded mandates from the state would be one that would be helpful to us, because I think, as a pretty avid observer of what's been going on in the last decade or so, the state has given us more to do and taken away more of our revenue every single legislative session. So when you're having that discussion with Governor Ricketts, you might indicate to him that that's the phenomena under his administration, and I think the last 2 or 3 administrations that we've had in the governor's office in Lincoln. And we have that same discussion with the legislature every year. So those are things that would be helpful. Adjustments to Turk authority would be helpful. We don't enjoy people who are not elected telling us what our tax rate's going to be. Taxation without representation was one of the foundation ideas that led to the American Revolution. And we feel that the Turk has overstepped their bounds on a number of occasions in telling us what to do with our own tax base. We're perfectly willing to do what we need to do and stand up in front of the voters when the elections come around. Turk doesn't do that. And so we need to make some adjustments there. And again, when you're talking to Governor Ricketts, you might make those suggestions to him that we should rein in the unelected authority of Turk to set tax rates at the local level, property tax rates. Thanks again for your help on this, and like I said, working together, I'm sure that we can make this better.
Commissioner Morgan.
I think, again, and we've done it many times, thank you for your participation in your organization and what you do and the watchdog that you provide to the taxpayers. My thought is, and we'll visit with Joe Lorenz, our finance director, who's done a very good job for all of us in trying to be sure we do everything we can to be transparent. My thought is that we'll maybe have a meeting in August that'll be open to the public. We'll talk about that, and Joe, see if that might work somewhere after the 21st, and go through these items one by one and kind of talk about what the priorities might be, And Doug will make sure you get an invite. We'll talk about that soon and let all the commissioners know about that. Maybe, and I like to have it here. Mike, I just think that's a good place to have it.
That's fine.
And we may even do it in this room, or else we'll do it at 9:03. So we'll talk about that shortly in the next few days and have a date set that works for everyone. So thank you again for this list, and we'll see what we can do.
Commissioner Boyle.
Well, it may be even important enough to substitute this discussion for a county board meeting, or at least a big chunk of it. If there's some things that we can move to the next meeting, we could probably virtually clear our agenda for this discussion. There's another thing that I've been thinking about, and I'll say it now. I'd like to see the chair of our board invite the governor's budget people up here to Omaha and to Douglas County, and to listen to the work that we go through, because you know, I've been lectured so many times particularly by former Governor Heineman, when we'd have meetings. There were 4 county people, 4 city, and 4 school boards, and Governor Heineman would stand up and open the meeting lecture and say, you know, you need to cut your spending. And I'd raise my hand, and he'd say, yes, Mike, and I'd stand up and I'd say, you know, with all due respect, Governor, you need to quit signing bills that require us to spend money. And so, you know, doesn't seem this disconnect about lecturing to us. It doesn't help, because, you know, you tell us, as Mr. Kavanaugh said, you're the one who runs the show. I think it'd be helpful to have someone from, you know, his chief budget guy, or man or woman, come up here and hear this, because they have the idea that we're just a bunch of spendthrifts going off and, you know, buying bowling balls for everybody or something. I mean, it's so much tighter, and the problems we have with mental illness and all that, we need to get this under control. So I think I'm going to ask Commissioner Borgerson if she'll invite the governor's top tax people to come up, hear our story, and then help us with solutions. I mean, otherwise, we're talking about all this among ourselves, and we need to have the people who control this or have some input be present, I think.
Go ahead.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
My thought is, Joe Lorenz, I know, talks to the city finance director and others. My thought is, I'm sure our chairperson would agree with you. I think Joe can make some contacts. We'll figure out the date, and then he can make some contacts with the state to say we'd like to have a representative from the governor's office come to it, period. So I think we'll just move that forward, what you said.
And
Totally.
We'll tell them that we'll have our security people disarm when they come to the meeting, so. Okay.
All right. So thank you again, Doug, and thanks for the time you spend. Doug and I met with a few state senators in the last week, and he calls me to do that, and we got a little meeting place there at 119th and Pacific, and it works out for everybody. So I thank you for that.
We are still in the public hearing. Is there anyone else that would like to comment?
Thank you. My name is Larry Storer, 5015 Lafayette, Omaha. I'm with Doug today, and thank you, Doug, for all the work you do. My comments, however, are all my own, and Mr. Kavanaugh got me started again here. We just had a 4th of July celebration, and we talk about taxation without representation. We've had this discussion before about now we're getting the governor down here, but you've forgotten something. In a republic, we act through our elected representatives. However, the governor is not the only person in state government, is he? Aren't there, how many senators? 30-some senators that like to filibuster? Want to get them down here? There's some of those senators that need to be involved in this. But as much as we need balanced budgets, and most all of the levels of government budgets are overspent, we also need the private partnerships that we hear so much about, such as the Sherwood Foundation. But what we don't need is for them helping to write the laws and direct the laws that are passed and the way the budgets are spent and what goes to what. Now, I've been in various levels of government committee meetings over the last few years. I know that specifically Sherwood Foundation is the example I quote most often. as a good community partner, and thank God that they're there. But that does not give them the right to be the stakeholder, and I'm not. Those partners and yourselves, those are the stakeholders that you talk about in all of the things that are printed. You're not meaning me as a stakeholder. I seldom get the input unless it's maybe 3 minutes. Sometimes that's filibustered. But when you go to those meetings, everybody sitting at those official chairs are the stakeholders. And a lot of those are people from Sherwood or connections. I was really amazed not very long ago watching the televised broadcast from ETV at the state hearings on some human services things. One of the senators introduced a bill asking for like $20,000 or $2 million to go out into the school districts all across the state of Nebraska to look for people with mental illness problems, kids. $20,000 for each district or more. Did they have permission? How do you collect information on that without violating somebody's privacy? It's a violation of privacy laws, is it not? I, as a taxpayer with a grandchild in special needs, are not privy to information because of privacy laws. But you people can go out and share that information back and forth. Now we have a controversy with voter registration. Everybody says there is no voter fraud, but the federal government wants to check the federal election process. And the states are saying, no, it's none of your business. Excuse me, it is. It was a federal election, was it not? States have no right to refuse that unless they want to secede from a union. Well, the same thing works for the state government or the city government or the county government. The other example, and then I'll be quiet, is maybe it's defunct now, but there's a steering committee. Yeah, it's county board level, but it involves people from the city positions, but also the community partners, the stakeholders, OPS, OIS, OPS, whatever you want to call it. Maybe they've changed the name. People were brought in and paid money to do a study and then recommend to the county board what we do with people incarcerated, particularly in the juvenile division. And then you follow that stuff and you institute a program. Those people were not Nebraskans. They were, in one case, it was a former Supreme Court justice from Pennsylvania that came in to tell us how to find families, how to find children and solve problems. The state paid them money to do that. That took federal, state resources, maybe even city resources, and that cost me money through my tax dollars, and my property tax is over $4,000. It's probably $5,000 now. So I may have to move out of Nebraska. Kansas, maybe. Point is, there are a lot of people that don't have the time to dig into things like Doug does, but they also miss the things that I look at. He's so busy in the figures that he doesn't see those things I've just mentioned. So when you're doing your budget, decide whether you absolutely need to pay an outside organization or you absolutely need to accept money from a community partner. If you don't have it in your budget, you can't afford it through the tax levies, then don't ask for money from outside people because they will control it in the end. And that's what a revolution was about. Thank you.
Is this old or new?
What?
I see you on the board. You got a request?
Just a comment.
Go.
Yes, I wanted to make just a couple of comments if I could. The Sherwood Foundation they don't contact us and say, let's do this. There are programs that, things that we think will help, like the alcohol treatment program and all this sort of thing, get people who, instead of having them pay a fine and go off and do the same thing over again, they come in and get alcohol treatment. We monitor their use and all that sort of thing. Those are the sort of things that are funded by grants from various sources. And I think you heard our deputy director in charge of that say today that it wasn't property taxes that funded that. And I don't want to see, I'm not in favor of consultants. As a matter of fact, I'm battling on another field, not to do with county government, battling the use of consultants on some things right now in my legal practice. And I just am opposed to them, and they have to really perform. You know, I really don't care for them very much. But what we get from some of these people, and I'll give you an example. Commissioner Borgeson is very active with the National Association of County Officials, as was Commissioner Rogers. And one of the things that she discovered, which could be very useful here, as we try to deal with a population that's about 40% mentally ill in our correction facility, and then they come and go and they're very expensive to treat, is something that has been developed in Oakland, California, and it's a psychiatric emergency room. And so when the police, if you read the story, it was an excellent story in the World Herald a couple days ago about dealing with mentally ill people, that there's would be a psychiatric emergency room where these people could be taken and treated and get them out of the law enforcement side of things and try to get them some help. And so that's the sort of thing that we look at, and we would be remiss if we didn't ask other counties around the nation, what are you doing to combat people who are belligerent and fight our police officers and sheriff's deputies on the streets? Oakland says, we've got a psychiatric ER, and we're looking into it, and we're going to find a way to fund it. So, and we are very, very concerned about property taxes, very concerned. I now have 4 grown children, all of them homeowners in Omaha, and I think of them, one son has 6 children, one has 5, another has 2, and the other one I'm forgetting, isn't that terrible? Let's see, he's got 3. So I have families in town that are very much affected by this, and I take it personally, just like you do. So I want to thank you for coming forward, but to kind of fill in some of the things about the grants that we use. We have a man, a former police officer, who writes grants for the sheriff's office. He's a grant writer, Ken Bavasso. He goes out and gets grants. And so we do have that sort of thing that helps relieve the pressure. We're very sensitive. We're very aware of what's going on with property taxes. So I agree with you, and I thank you.
Well, I don't have the answers either, Mr. Boyle. All I'm saying is that national associations and the federations of state governments, and councils of this and councils of that, the Sherwoods, they all come in, and maybe I forgot to mention on the ETV broadcast where the state senator was asked a question by the other committee members, and she had to turn around and ask. I'm sorry, but the Sherwood Foundation will have to answer that question for you. Connections will have to answer that question for you. On my tax dollars, I don't think so. We must have people in Omaha that are also concerned that can help solve those problems. Best practices from somebody in California? I don't think so. Let's don't spend the money to get their advice, you know. And let's don't accept their programs or bring one of their people in and pay them $20,000.
We're not doing
that. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Cut that kind of stuff out of the budget. We've got people in Nebraska. We've got universities that are there on my tax dollars.
Yeah.
We must have the resources here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other person want to comment on the budget? We're still in public comment. Seeing none, and nobody from the board, we will close the public hearing. We can vote on the budget today. What's the will of the board?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Commissioner Kraft.
Yes, regarding the mental health issues, I'm not going to propose it for this year because during the past few months, I've been, because of recovering from the heart surgery, a little bit slower than usual. Maybe I should say a lot slower than usual. But I would like to, in the next year's budget, and I have to develop a plan before I increase it, but propose that we spend an extra $1 million in a way that is necessary to help keep the mentally ill out of our correctional facility. Judging by what I've read and seen, it should save us $3 or more for every dollar we spend, whether it's by funding or helping fund or creating the initial steps for the psychiatric emergency room, are putting the money into the resources we currently use. But this needs discussion with Sherry Glassnep and with the state and with the sheriff and with the police chief and the city of Omaha. It's going to have to be a comprehensive. And it's probably going to take a year to develop this. But I just want everyone to be aware that this is something I think we need to do, and I think we need to study. So next year, don't be surprised if I propose something like that. Thank you.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Relative to moving forward with approval of this budget today, I would recommend that maybe we continue it at least until the chairman has an opportunity to be with us to vote on it. And I have a question for our new director of the Douglas County Health Center, if she could come down for a second relative to this as well.
Good morning. Jean Hartnett with the Douglas County Health Center.
Ms. Hartnett, thank you. I know that you're new to Douglas County, but your department is one of the two largest that we oversee directly as county commissioners. And you probably were here when I asked Deputy Director of Corrections, Hubbard, whether or not they'd had an opportunity to review the budget and had any recommendations, and they had, and he outlined reasons for some of the budget increases of that department. You're the other big department.
Yes.
I'll ask you the same questions. Have you had an opportunity to review the budget recommendation for FY 17-18?
I have not. I have requested a meeting with our finance director, and that meeting has not been scheduled yet.
Okay. And I know that we have a trustee meeting next Monday, is that correct?
17th. It is Monday, yes, the 17th.
And, you know, in addition to the reasons that I stated before, I think that it would only be prudent if we took the time to allow the director of one of our two largest departments to at least review the budget document proposal for comment at our already regularly scheduled Board of Trustees meeting at the Health Center next Monday, and see if between now and then she has any recommendations relative to that. So, you know, for those reasons, I would maybe ask that the board consider putting off formal approval of the budget until the chairman is back and the director of one of our two largest departments has the opportunity to at least review the budget document that she's going to be asked to operate under for the next fiscal year.
Commissioner Kraft, let me know the chair is fine with the budget as it is, from my understanding.
Well,
Commissioner Kraft.
Mark, if he wants to ask.
Yes, I'm not in favor of a layover. We've had so many discussions on this. The general consensus that we feel from the board is that we're ready to vote on it. There's no, in my opinion, no reason other than some concern, but not enough major concern, about the budget for our new director. Being she's hasn't gotten her feet wet, so to speak, in the process, she may want to fund something that doesn't need additional funding in this situation. And she is not new to Douglas County.
That's true.
She's born and bred pretty much in the area. So I'm in favor of voting it now. Also related to our $390 million budget for last year, $1 million is 1/4 of 1%. Going back to my previous comment, 1/4 of 1% of our budget if we were to increase it by $1 million for the stated purposes. Thank you.
Commissioner Morgan.
Okay. I'm not in favor of delaying it. I have great confidence in Jean in her job and working with Dee Dee Will and so on out there, and I know she was participating. And Joe, I know you had some conversations on that with her and so on as you went through that important budget. Do you have any
Yes,
comments you want to make?
you know, as we put together the budget, I worked a lot with Dee Dee and, of course, with separately, but it's still within the budget, the Community Health Center with Sherry, and we did have some quite detailed discussions on the budget, and so there was some input coming out of that organization.
The other thing you did is you notified all of us if we had any questions, input, or whatever. Did you have any response?
No.
But you did put that out to all of us if we did, and that's why I think what Commissioner Kraft said, that we move ahead with this, and I'm certain that the chairperson, Marianne Borgeson, isn't going to mind that she missed it. She told me she was supportive of what we were doing. Commissioner Boyle, did you have any, because we work together like Martin and Lewis, do you have anything you want to
Well,
add?
you know, excuse me, I'd ask, you know, our budget director, what is the budget for the Douglas County Health Center, and, you know, what was it last year and what is it this year overall? And I mean, it's a several multi-million-dollar budget. It is the second largest. And I don't know, you know, if something has to happen, we have a shortage of nurses, there's going to be a lot of things going on, and I just don't see that. I mean, it's unfortunate this meeting didn't occur. I don't know why it didn't, but even then, I don't know if it would have an impact where someone could reshape a budget in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't know if that could happen. We do have competent people out there in the finance office at the health center who've prepared these budgets for years, and they're still on target. So I really think that Ms. Hartnett will find it a budget she can live with. And I know from reading about her that she's very skilled, and she'll be able to move things around if she needs to. So I'm not concerned. This is not a time bomb. This is a ladyfinger. For me, it's just not that. It's just not a matter of concern. And I know that Commissioner Borgeson, that we've had many, many talks, and she does support the budget. So I think we ought to move on with it. I really do.
So I'd call for the question if that's appropriate.
Well, you know,
Chairperson.
You can, but technically the question going to call for the question would require a vote of 2/3 of the board.
Oh,
and
then you.
currently you got to.
Are there some others that want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner
Then-
Kavanaugh.
Right. I appreciate the hard work that Commissioner Boyle and Commissioner Morgan have put in on this budget. I know that they've consulted with a lot of people on this. I just think that probably be best practices if we had all of our commissioners, particularly the chairman of the board, here to vote on it. And secondly, if we allowed the director, one of our two largest departments, to at least see the budget. For instance, the budget documents that we have indicate, as Commissioner Boyle pointed out, the nursing issue at the Douglas County Health Center is of concern. I think the expenditure for nursing at the Douglas County Health Center was 119% of the approved budget for 2016-2017. I guess I'd have a couple of questions about that if I was the incoming director. There are always, I think, robust discussions relative to expenditures in certain areas, and we, don't, I think, lose anything by having those. There's no statutory reason why we have to rush to approve this budget today. None. Absolutely none. And, laying it over for a week to allow the director to review the budget that they're going to be operating under for one of our major departments, and allow the chairman of our board to participate in the vote on one of probably the two most important votes of the year, how we spend the money and how we raise the money. You kind of want to be present for those two votes, I think, is, I think, just common courtesy. So I'm not going to be voting for this budget today for those reasons, and I strongly urge us to, take a prudent, best practices approach to budgeting and lay it over for a week to allow everybody to participate in it as fully as possible. Nothing against the budget process. I want to reiterate, I think that Commissioner Boyle and Commissioner Morgan have done yeoman's work in this budget process. I just think that a week more and, it doesn't hurt anything, could help.
Commissioner Duda.
Thank you. One of the things that this board has improved in its budget process through the many years I've gotten to be a part of it is by moving it up. We used to approve it in August, which most counties do, which state law allows. I don't consider that best practice to wait until you're 2 months into a fiscal year before you tell your department heads what their budget is. Oh, you may already be over budget. Sorry about that. Best practice, that term really bothers me. Apparently, I don't do best practice. To say all 7 commissioners have to be here, what if a commissioner isn't here next week? Best practice says we lay it over. Why do we have to have all 7 commissioners present, and what if that doesn't happen? Best practice to me is getting your budget done in a timely fashion so that your elected officials and department heads know as early in the fiscal year as possible what the expectations of them are. To lay it over and lay it over, if we see something Monday that we want to change on Tuesday, we can't change it on Tuesday. We'll change it for a week or 2 later. Drag this out. We've got a good budget before us. Frankly, it's been one of the easier budget practices or budgets that I've gotten to go through. I think we have a good budget. To me, best practice says tell people what their budget is. Don't keep them guessing well into the fiscal year. Thank you.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a misunderstanding of what I'm asking for. It's not to lay this over until August. It's to lay this over until July 18th, 1 week, and allow us to at least have one of the directors of one of our biggest departments look at the budget. Maybe they have recommendations, maybe they don't, maybe their recommendations make sense, maybe they don't. They haven't seen it. And, I don't know what the problem is with best practices. I think best practices are actually best practices. And we benefit by having an attitude that employs best practices. I'm not interested in not having best practices. So having the chairman of our board and the director of one of our 2 departments participate in the budget process, I think, are best practices. And without that, I think we are voluntarily electing not to have best practices. I'm not interested in doing that. I think Douglas County deserves the best that we can give them.
Commissioner Boyle.
Well, thank you. Commissioner Kavanaugh, as you know, I have been on the wrong end of the stick several times with 6-1 votes, and the county fair is one of them, and you just, an extension, and go on, and crime lab, yada, yada. The point is that you reach a point where you have to acknowledge that I'm not going to have my way, and that's where you are right now, with all due respect. So I think it's time. You've been repeating your positions, so we understand your positions. We don't agree with them.
Seeing no further questions, there's a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion. Please vote.
This is the budget.
This is
the big one.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Motion passes. Commissioner Kavanaugh voting no. All other commissioners present voting yes.
Committee and discussion. Item A, Finance. Commissioners Morgan and Boyle. Anything further? Okay.
I would like to thank our finance director. I have tremendous respect for him. He is so involved, available, transparent, open for information, available. I've talked to him at odd hours of the day and night about questions. I email him. I get responses at early morning hours. He's done a terrific job, and we're so fortunate to have his service. You know, and I'm not shy to criticize, as you know, so this is a real true comment about his skills and what he's done for us. So, Joe, I want to personally thank you. From my point of view, you are doing a terrific job and serving the taxpayers of this county very well. And I really appreciate that you're open to the folks who prepare criticism of our spending. You don't take it personal, and I think that's the way it ought to be. So thank you, Joe.
Commissioner Moore.
I just want to echo what you just said, Commissioner Boyle, and I thank you for, you know, like putting out the email to all of us to respond to you, to let you know, and sometimes we don't all respond, and you continue a great effort, and I know you'll work with Gene out at the Health Center and all directors and elected officials. I also again want to thank Doug. And there is one part of the budget that I want to continue with unless I really hear Doug and other commissioners, the majority, disagreeing with. I really like the idea of the department elected officials or the department director coming before our county board meeting to ask for their increase. I think, and Claire, I thank you for your comment about this being one of the easier budgets to go through. I think that really helped us, you know, doing it right here and listening to those reasons. Everyone sees it, and we're not in 903 going through interrogations or whatever without asking them to cut their budget. So those parts, if I'm a finance person, I'll continue that. And Mark, I know you started when I first got here on the budget with me, and I thank you for your leadership in that first couple of years. Okay? So thanks for approving this budget. And I've already talked to Joe about meeting after the 21st, and we'll start the discussions as Mike suggested. He'll get some dates, and we'll make sure we invite the governor way ahead of time, one of his staff people or someone to be here, and other people that you deem might be helpful. And I know Gene will probably have some input for us before then, too.
Okay, seeing no further discussion on finance, we'll move to Child and Youth Services. Item 1 is a resolution approving the second addendum to the UNO Community Engagement Center Facility Agreement. This is budgeted, and this is the lease payment for the Operation Youth Success Facility, which we've done here in the past. So what's the will of the board? There's a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, please vote.
Motion passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
I need to ask the board for an emergency regarding an item that Commissioner Borgeson sent on both of our behalf. The reason it's an emergency is because it was sent yesterday, but the staff didn't see it till late and missed it from putting it on. So it was sent over the weekend, and by the time it was published, we couldn't put it on. So she sent you the email, and there was some response. I guess the request is for support of the Black Male Achievement Conference that is happening Thursday and Friday at Creighton. The request is for $5,000. They did submit to the Visitors Improvement Fund. They denied it. And the request is in regards to the My Brother's Keeper resolution we passed a couple of years ago. It's a regional conference with the possibility of becoming a national conference that comes here next year. The city put in 10. We're asking we put in 5 to support it. And that would close the request. There's a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second.
So this vote is simply declaring the emergency for consideration?
Yes.
Thank you.
There's a motion and a second. Please vote.
One moment, please.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So as I said, I've explained that.
Commissioner Kavanaugh. Motion passes. Commissioner Kavanaugh abstained. All our commissioners voting yes.
And I'd ask for the board support for the 5,000. There's a motion, is there a second? Commissioner Kraft?
Just a quick suggestion. When you say blackmail, may I suggest you pause between black and mail?
Yeah, exactly. And let me note, just to recap this, the organizations that's holding it is named the Black Male Achievement, but the My Brother's Keeper is an male and female effort for children of color. It's a largely private nonprofit sponsored event. The event again helps us become kind of registered on the scale with the nationals and puts us in play to receive some other outside funding to help with related issues. Commissioner Duda.
Thank you. I'm okay with funding this, but to me, it would be more appropriate for this to come out of visitor improvement funds than property taxes. I think that's what the visitor improvement fund is for, and I would be very comfortable with that. But property taxes, I'm not. We don't do third-party funding anymore. I'm not real comfortable with the precedent of using property taxes for this expenditure. Thank you.
And let me say, I am fine with that. I've tried to respect the unwritten rule of giving some time before you dip back in there after the vote. I definitely adhere to that in the future, but I've tried to respect that unwritten rule. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thanks. I just have some questions on what we're talking about voting here. Is there any documentation in our packet here today relative to this item?
Nope, no documentation.
Okay. So are you familiar with this program?
Very familiar.
Okay. Who's the sponsor?
Sponsor of it is Black Men United, an organization here in town. The conference is being held at Creighton, and as I said, they've been doing some fundraising. They've come up 5 short, and they've asked if the county could support that to close out what's needed for the conference. So that's why it's here.
Okay. And when is the conference?
Conference is this Thursday and Friday at Creighton.
And this conference is drawing people from what area, what community, who's coming to the conference?
People could be coming from over the country, but it's drawing people from immediate regions, so that would be Iowa, Minnesota, Kansas, North, South Dakota, and I think possibly Illinois, Missouri.
And it's been promoted in this area?
Yes.
Okay. The Black Men United group is a group that we have funded in the past?
No, we have not. The city of Omaha has funded them a couple of times.
Okay. And what's the purpose of the conference?
Purpose of the conference is to continue the effort of the President Obama's My Brother's Keeper initiative started in 2003 to address some of the disproportionality in education, criminal justice, healthcare, and housing in regards to the issues regarding kids of color and some of the issues going around the country. It most likely will be continued in the post-presidential era. No federal money was given for that. Private foundations around the country came together at the conference in Washington. I attended that when I was the president of NACO, and we passed a resolution. By that resolution being passed by us, that allowed us to be able to participate in some of the efforts around the country. So it was not creating any new programs, it was getting programs that are up to speed. So by the conference being here, it'll be able to highlight some of the initiatives of a Black Man United, the empowerment network that has happened over the years in regards to providing the agenda to try to address some of the deficiencies in not only Omaha, but North and some parts of South Omaha also.
Black Men United is a national group?
Black Men United is a local group. The Black Male Achievement Conference is one nonprofit entity that's operating under the My Brother's Keeper effort. They also nationally operate with the Soros Foundation and some other foundations around the country to provide private funding to help bring programs around the country up to capacity.
Is there a program available that we could look at relative to this conference?
What do you mean a program?
Well,
Budget.
as far as I can tell, and maybe Clerk Esch can enlighten us on this, we don't have a single scrap of paper on this thing. Is that correct?
We don't.
Okay, there's nothing written down about this. We don't know anything about it. But presumably, if it's that short term and it's been in preparation for some time, there's a published program of who's going to be presenting.
Yeah, I think there is, and I can provide that through the email that was provided to the board. There's a link connected to the agenda and what's going on in that respect.
Okay. So who are the presenters of this program?
I know there's one local presentation that I'll be moderating with a person from Black Men United, and Ms. Shelley Henderson, who has been organizing the My Brother's Keeper effort for the last 2 years here. Willie Barney with the Empowerment Network, and also Reverend Tony Sanders, who's the president of the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance. There are some other programs that will happen around health. There's some that will happen around education, and there will be some on the criminal justice system. And there are local participants participating, and some from around there. I can't give them to you by name right now. I have to go look that up.
That's fine. You can forward us something on this.
I can do that.
Okay. And the head of Black Men United here in Omaha is who?
It's a gentleman by the name of Willie Hamilton.
Okay. And is he participating in this conference?
He is. He's been fundraising for it and been planning around it for the last 6 months in regards to coordinating people with that.
Do we know what the attendance at this conference is going to be?
I don't have the count yet from him.
But people obviously have by now registered for this thing, right?
They have.
And with the space at Creighton, there'd be some idea that they're going to have 50, 100, 1,000.
Well, the number they've gauged of actual attendance, they've gauged somewhere between 200 and 300 people.
Okay.
I don't know what the exact count will be.
Yeah, from a regional area, though.
Yeah.
Right. So going this route rather than the visitors improvement route is necessary because?
It's necessary just because they've, it's a little bit of, I guess, my own interpretation of history in trying to honor the process of the Business Improvement Fund. Money is coming, if this would have been 3 months later, I would have requested it from that, but being that it's so soon after the process, based on dialogue on the record a couple of years ago, I tried to respect the process and not supersede the decision immediately.
Okay. But if this were to develop into something that's an annual going forward?
I would ask for it out of the 262 process.
Thank
and my
you.
hope is if this goes, they get the national conference here next year.
And this hasn't occurred before anywhere? This is
It's occurred before. In December, there was a meeting in Louisville of the group that happened. They're having a meeting here in Omaha now with the opportunity to have the national conference here in a couple of years, ideally next year.
Very good. Thank you.
Dan.
Dan Ashton, County Clerk. I just wanted to, if this is approved, I just want to make sure the organization is aware that they're not going to get the money by Thursday. Okay, all right. That's all. I just want to make sure that they were aware that it's not going to be before Thursday or Friday. So
they know it'll be next week.
All right, thanks.
Can't you write them a personal check?
With no discussion, please vote. Oh, sorry.
Just a question to the makers of the motion, because I would support this if it was coming out of the Visitor Improvement Fund. I can't support it if it's coming out of property taxes. My question to the maker of the motion, what fund is this coming out of?
This will be the fees and contracts piece of the general fund.
Okay, so it is coming out of property taxes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I understand.
And may I clarify? Oh, sorry. It's to the motion is to approve $5,000 for the Black Male Achievement Conference.
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes. All right. Please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioner Duda voting no. All other commissioners present voting yes.
Thank you all. I appreciate it, and I understand the rationales. We'll go now to the community service. Item 1 is a resolution requesting that the state of Nebraska refuse to provide voting records to the Presidential Commission on Election Integrity. Commissioner Kraft.
I love fuel issues. I can imagine some of my commissioners may not be on board with this resolution, but there have been 2 articles in the Omaha World Herald recently. One is written by Emily Knorr and Martha Stoddard, and it was July 7th. And in it says, quote, knowing how the data will be used, how it will be secured, and how it might be publicly shared by the Commission is vitally important. That was said by John Gill, and I quote it directly. The same article says that this could, since the Commission has not said how the information, this is on page 2, not said how the information will be used, but it will be released publicly, which Gell said could conflict with Nebraska law. For instance, voter information may not be used for commercial purposes. How is this information going to be used? We have no clue. Are there assurances? Well, I'm going to explain one of my major concerns. You put all this information in one database, and if the Pentagon's been hacked, which it has, if the Treasury Department's been hacked, which it has, how can we be knowledgeable and comfortable having all of the state's data in one place? It's much harder to hack 50 different states than it is, and more time consuming than it is to hack one data source. I do believe it's best if this information not be compiled into a national database. The states are granted the right over voting with some restrictions. And this national database goes against what I believe was the original intention of the Constitution. Not being an expert on the Constitution, that's why I say I believe. Other things that were said in the same article, Nebraska law and our law is specific about the uses for the data. And he has concerns about whether the data was going to continue to be secure, and he had some questions about that. The governor even had expressed, if I could find it here, concern, well, someplace in here it says this. No, but the governor had expressed concern. If Senator Gell, who said he's going to release some of the information, and the governor has some concern, I think we should all have some concern. Now, in Sunday, and I could talk for a half an hour on this, but out of respect of everybody's time, I'm not going to.
Thank you.
Because there are a lot more quotes in that article. This is page 9B of July 9th, Sunday's paper. Commission must keep voter data safe. If this sensitive data is to be collected and aggregated by the federal government, then they must ensure the data is not stolen by hackers or insiders. We've seen that happening. Think of Snowden. There is some protection in the fact that U.S. voting systems are distributed among thousands of jurisdictions. By the way, this article was by Michael Surtoff. He was U.S. Homeland Security Secretary from 2005 to 2009. Okay. What is our plan to protect it? Nothing's been stated. Okay. We also know that foreign intelligence agencies seek large databases on America for counterintelligence purposes. This is why the theft of more than 20 million personal files from the U.S. Office of Personal Management and the hacking of more than 500 million Yahoo accounts were such troubling incidents. Congress said the states need to be advised on how any voter data would be housed and where. Would it be encrypted? Who would have administrative access to the data? And what restrictions would be in place? Also very important, it was said that would those granted access be subject to security background investigations? And would their behavior be supervised to prevent the kind of insider theft that we saw with Edward Snowden? What kind of audit procedures would be in place? With what I've seen from this administration and their staff, I have major concerns about what security would be in place, who had access to it, and it should not be granted, as this administration has a habit of giving us misinformation and then later on deciding, oh wait, I've been exposed, and then saying, yes, I did meet with the Russians. You know, so that's all at the moment.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, excuse me. I want to thank Commissioner Kraft for bringing this up. It's, to me, this is really flies in the face of my philosophy of government. These matters are best controlled by local officials. John Gale is not running for re-election. He is a Republican. I have sent him repeatedly notes thanking him for his service. As a lawyer, I deal with the corporation department frequently. The service there is unbelievably competent, quick, and efficient, and correct. And again, I trust him with running the elections in Nebraska. I think he's done a remarkable job. He exudes real confidence and knowledge of the affairs, and plus his Neil Erickson, his chief deputy for many years, a Democrat, has done a really terrific job. It's a great office, and I hope that we get the same kind of leadership with whoever is elected. Having said that, I think these matters are local. And I'll tell you from my experience as a former election commissioner quite a few decades ago, I'll tell you some stories and some processes. I'll try to be as brief as possible about doing just exactly this, making sure that the election process is safe and secure. One of the things that we did in Omaha years ago with a list of registered voters that is provided to the parties and can be purchased, there is an agreement that's signed, and it's referred to several times, that these lists are to be used only for political purposes. They may not be used to sell insurance or sell anything, any kind of communication other than please vote for me or vote for this issue or vote against somebody, whatever it is. It's political only. So in consultation with the county attorney then, Don Knowles, we inserted several hundred phony names and phony addresses in an attempt to collect the names and collect these people, trap the people who would take this list of registered voters and use it for commercial or other purposes. We never had anybody do it. We never had. In all the years I was there, which covered Monty Taylor, a very good friend of mine, a Republican who appointed me, who actually became my brother, to tell you the truth. Monty was a terrific guy, and he instituted that process, and a remarkable one, and it kept on while I was there, so for a period, I guess, of 12 years. So another thing that we did was that when I first started, there used to be a process where the fellow called, it was always a man, a man who was the inspector, and he would go door to door in his precinct. That's what he did, and he would ask who lives here, and then he'd have a voter list. And when he would scratch off the name if someone had moved or died. And we also regularly checked, and they still do, get information from the Douglas County Health Department on persons who die and their names are removed. And they're actually, the registration is stamped right on the books, I mean, and they're recorded so that when someone comes in who is moved, say, wait a minute, what's the deal here? Prove where you are. And so it slows them down, and if they're going to vote where they used to live, they're prevented. They can't do that because lots of races are localized for legislature and so forth. So there are so many safeguards built in. And then to top it all off, we used a postcard system that is still in use today. Now, when you receive that innocuous-looking card that says this is your polling place, and you may say, what the hell are they wasting money on it? This is the same place I voted at for 5 years or whatever. We're not wasting money. What he's doing, he's checking to see, are you still there? Are you still alive? And if you aren't, those cards are not forwarded. They are not forwarded. The post office returns those by the thousands. And then then the voter registration is challenged by the Douglas County Election Commission. This occurs all across the state. And so that when someone, if someone who has moved shows up to a prior polling place, still in Nebraska, still living in Douglas County, but the wrong precinct, they are challenged and they cannot vote. And they may be able to vote in a federal election provisionally because it's the presidential office and they have a right as a citizen to vote for president. But that's it. So I mean, there are so many safeguards built in at present. I'm very concerned about this because there really is no evidence of voter fraud. And I'll mention two that I know of. One that I read about occurred in Iowa, and it is not significant that it's the party affiliation, and I apologize for bringing it up, but I think it's part of the story. There was a woman in Iowa who voted for President Trump, and in the paper she said she began to wonder I wonder if my ballot got counted, so then she went and voted again. And she wasn't prosecuted, but she was just puzzled for whatever reason, and she did it. It was no criminal intent, and I don't believe she was charged. My experience when I was election commissioner was a good friend of mine. I had a reputation, even among the Republicans, of cooperating and helping. And this was a woman who took ballots out to rest homes. And she herself was quite elderly, in her 80s or so. Really nice woman. We got along really well. And she'd come in and she would pick up a pile of 10 or 20 ballots for individuals who were in rest homes. Well, one morning I got a call from a rest home. I was election commissioner, and the administrator said, Mr. Boyle, something funny is going on out here. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, well, you have a woman out here who's getting people to vote, and she's just gone to a room where a woman's in a coma, and she voted. And I said, okay, I get that. And so we didn't have cell phones in those days or anything, and there's not much I could do, but I did say, would you please have that person call me, the one who's taking the ballots around? So I talked to her and I said, I can remember her name and I won't use it. I said, can you stop what you're doing and please come into the office? It's very important. So she did. And so I said, called her by her first name, and a wonderful woman. And I said, I'll just say her name was Rose. Rose, we just got a call and someone said you voted for someone who was in coma. Well, she burst into tears. And then her remark was, I just want my Republican candidates to win. And I said, you may, but you can't do this. So you have to stop. And I don't know what we're going to do with the ballots that you brought in, but you have to tell us if you've done this. And we didn't charge her with any crimes either. Now maybe that's wrong. We should have dragged this 80-year-old woman into court and charged her with voter fraud, but we didn't do it. I notified the county attorney and no charges were filed. Local control is the best way to go. It always is. And there are no exceptions. We know best what's taking place. The other thing that I did, and I wish they'd do it today, I don't think they do, is that all the polling places I staffed with people who lived in the precinct. And so it increased the odds of catching someone who came in and had moved. Because, wait a minute, you moved over to Saratoga Street. What are you doing here? That kind of thing. And so I'd like to see that. That may strengthen some things, but I'll suggest that to the election commissioner, who I have to say I think is the best we've ever had. Also, I want to mention that there really is no evidence of this, and I'm really concerned because this morning I read something in the paper, and I think this is true. It's going to have a chilling effect on people voting. They're going to be further intimidated and bothered. That it really is. It becomes a very hostile event almost. And I'm concerned about how this affects our armed forces, what's going to happen to them, and also Americans abroad, people that are voting You'd be surprised the number of ballots that are sent all around the world from Douglas County. I agree with Commissioner Kraft. I don't think it's unreasonable. I just don't think it exists. I am just stunned that it's gone this far, and frankly, the person from Kansas who is heading this has a reputation for drawing back on, for example, a lot of states have pulled back on the number of days you can vote. If you're going out of town and you know about it, you won't be able to vote 2 or 3 weeks in advance anymore. It'll be down to 5 or 6 days. The hours are diminished. I mean, the whole thing just really gets difficult. And at a time when we are trying to move the election commissioner's office to an area that has a parking lot and is suitable, several of us are working on that, it just flies in the face of what we're trying to do. America depends on people voting, and we all lament low turnout. This will further drive down turnout. It will make people fearful. And finally, I'll close with this. Several months ago, I was stopped at a store in South Omaha to pick up some things. I was out further in Sarpy County, and I came by and stopped and got some things. And an 80-year-old woman stopped me, and she was concerned about what was happening with voter ID and so forth. She says, Mr. Boyle, I have no ID. I don't drive. I have nothing. I've got a Social Security card, but I don't have a picture on it. What am I going to do? Well, you know, you're going to have to go to some government agency, I guess, and get one of these ID things, which is a terrible inconvenience. And I don't see her doing that. And I don't know how she votes. I don't care how she votes. But this has a chilling effect, and it is, I think, damaging to our system, which needs everybody who wants to vote able to vote without any artificial restrictions or fear of intimidation. So I think this is something that we should resist. Thank you.
May I? When we're done.
I'll give you time. I'll give you time for it. I'll give you time for it. But let me, Commissioner Kraft, is this a whole?
Yes. You know, to me, this stinks of big government, big brother. Overly stinks of big government, big brother. During my term here, I was introduced to somebody who wouldn't talk about the 2050 plan because they thought that was part of the Agenda 21. Somebody else after that introduced me to what is called the Illuminati, which I had never heard of before. You know what I see in Washington? What they're fearful of. I see this administration bringing issues in the little bit of research I've done on the Illuminati and Agenda 21 into play. Now, voter fraud. Commissioner Boyle brought up the lady in Iowa. She was recently convicted. I'm not sure if she was sentenced to 90 days or probation, but she recently was convicted. And that appears to be the only case in Iowa that they could find where there was voter fraud. Here in Nebraska, there's been rumors, but no documentation other than 2 votes in some small counties that were questionable. Then we look at what is this going to cost us in tax dollars. You all talk about tax dollars. Well, has a cost-benefit analysis been done? If there's only 10 cases in the state, and Texas did tremendous research and couldn't find any, Kansas, under this Chris Kobach, who was Secretary of State of Kansas, didn't find any significant voter fraud. How much are we going to spend collecting this data, analyzing this data, enforcing this data, compared to the benefits we get? Another thing is, again, going back to the World Herald, the Commission has not said how it will use this information, but that it will be released publicly. The Secretary of State's office said the Commission has not requested formally, and it should be all formally done, just like you or I would have to do, all of that information, but it also seeks additional information. Why do they want this additional information? That is not covered under state statutes. Those include information on felony convictions, military, and overseas registration. And information related to registration in another state, that information will not be provided to the commission. Well, I'm not the only one who has concerns. Last I read, 45 states refused to give all of the information, and 10 states refused to give any information to this commission. There is serious concern about voter repression, voter, how can I say this?
Suppression.
Suppression, isn't that what I said?
Yes.
Okay. I have, weeding out people they don't want to vote. So, again, I make the motion that this resolution be accepted and sent to the governor and the Secretary of State.
There is already a motion, I think, in a second there. Am I wrong? Okay, well then it is now. Commissioner Duda.
I think I'm about to show the world why I have no friends on the county board. When I take my best friends and argue against them. But I've heard two things here I like. I appreciate the emphasis on local control. I quite agree with that. And it's nice to hear the kind words of a fellow Omaha North High Viking, our Secretary of State, John Gale. I do think he is very good at what he does. I have a great deal of respect for him as well. But when we look at the federal system of government that we're a part of, it's a three-tiered system. You've got national, state, county. Notice cities aren't in that. National, state, county. This is a squabble between national and state. Why is the county sticking its nose into, this isn't any of our business. If we're going to start looking for things that we don't like about what the president is doing, these meetings are going to take a long time. We don't have enough time to get into every issue of things that we don't like on the national level, perhaps even the state level. I prefer if we conduct our business around Douglas County government. That's what we were elected to do. We aren't elected to stick our nose into between the state and the national level. So I don't know if I'm going to vote no or abstain, but this is going where we don't need to go. It really doesn't directly involve us, and so thank you.
Commissioner, well, if you want to hold, I'm going to let the gentleman make his comment, and I'll come back to you. Sir.
Thank you. I don't know why I come on the days that these are the topics. I've already given my name, and do I need to do it again?
Yep.
Okay. I've been around for quite a while, Mr. Boyle, and
did you give it though, so it's on record,
sir?
Morgan, did you give your name so it's on record?
Again, Larry Storer.
Thank you.
S-T-O-R-E-R, 5015 Lafayette. Yes, it should be local. However, when you're dealing with a national election, that kind of takes supersedence, I believe. The word best practices, well, excuse me, the Omaha World Herald isn't necessarily always best practice. If there's any kind of shape, form of election fraud in any way, that needs to be cleaned up. Now, we taxpayers think that, and voters assumed that had already been done. It's been done ever since. Why should there even be a question? There should be absolutely no way for voter fraud. No provisional ballots, whatever. But when you have election commissioners, et cetera, that may be elected or may be appointed, whatever, they're still party affiliated, aren't they? The governor in the state says it's a nonpartisan legislature. That's BS. Everybody down there is political. And as everybody here is political. And now I have Mr. Kraft sort of, I think, assaulting our new president. Well, how about the 8 years of the other president? Let's talk about that too, okay? No voter fraud it shouldn't even be a discussion. There should have been no voter fraud. Should have been analyzed and fixed. If our government can't protect the data, then we're in deep trouble. But it's already shared. It was printed so in the World Herald. That information is already shared. It's on the robocall list. I get calls at home because they got my name off the voter list. When I go in to vote, they ask me verbally name or address, and I have to disclose that, but somebody might have heard it. So, you know, privacy laws are a bunch of BS. It serves the people that are supposed to serve us, but it doesn't serve me. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Thank you. First, I want to say to Commissioner Duda that regardless of the times that we disagree, our relationship has blossomed over the years, and I have terrific respect. As I've said to your daughter, that when she gets ready to run for governor, I'm going to head the Democrats for Duda for governor, okay? And I really mean that. I mean, you have a wonderful family, and I respect you. And while we differ on opinions, they're done respectfully, and so I appreciate that very much. And for the other people on the board, I mean, we don't, you know, I voted consistently for people for the chair who are of the opposite party, and that just doesn't enter into things here. It really doesn't. We have our philosophies, and they show up sometimes like they might be now. But I think, you know, Mr. Storer makes some excellent points, except that, you know, there really are some really good safeguards in place. And, you know, probably, you know, I'm concerned about, look at the cyber crimes that have occurred, and turning over all these records and Social Security numbers and the last 4 digits or anything. I just really, you know, I'm very concerned about that. There's really, you know, I had just recently, I was paying a credit card, and I went to the credit card site and on my personal computer, and I had a $20,000 credit, which is not what I expected. So I immediately went out and spent it. No, I called the company, and I said, I think there's something wrong here. I've got a credit. I'm trying to pay, and I owe you some money, and this is all backward. So they immediately transferred me to the fraud, and it took about 20 minutes, but there was a company in Canada had hacked into this particular company and had given me a credit and then took the money out, but it still showed up as a credit. And you know, to this day, I still have a $9,000 credit, and I talked to them again yesterday. I said, there's something screwball-y about this. And they said, oh no, Mr. Boyle, that's your money. And I said, I don't think so. So there's cybercrime going on all over the place. So that concerns me a great deal. And as a matter of fact, yesterday I was trying to retrieve some email on the budget, and I kept asking for, please send this to me. And I had another group of people I was trying to get information from our condo association, and I kept asking, send me the minutes, send me the minutes, and I'm the chair of it, and send me all this information. It never arrived. You know why? Someone has gone in and changed my email, my law office email, so that it sends it somewhere else. So I've got a big problem going on with my computer, obviously. So anyway, I guess what I'll say is that safeguards, I believe, are in place, and probably the best thing that we could do as individuals, to tell you the truth, is that I think, I believe in the individual in our community, every one of us. I believe that we're pretty straightforward people, particularly here in the Midwest. I think we ought to volunteer to work at our polling place. And if you want to, volunteer to work in one that you think is sketchy. And you can do that by, and I'll give this number out in case someone at home or on Facebook or MyFace, whatever it is, wants to volunteer, 402-444-8683, which is 402-444-VOTE. And that would be the safeguard that we need, not this expensive investigation stuff. Let's participate and make our own polling places safe, one at a time.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. C, please.
we're in trouble.
Good morning, Doug Kagan for 16 South 130th Street, representing Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. We urge the county commissioners to just dispense with this resolution. The Kraft resolution asked the board to urge both the governor and Secretary of State to deny the Presidential Commission on Election Integrity request for state voting records. Notwithstanding decisions on this matter by other states, we believe that our Secretary of State will comply reasonably with this request. Secretary Gale publicly has pledged to not release confidential voter information unless and until receiving assurances about how such data will be used, assurances about a high level of security for all this information, and in compliance with Nebraska law, particularly barring release of Social Security numbers, which are withheld under state law. The Commission seeks information about felony convictions and military and overseas registration status, but such information is not even available on our state voter registration records. I think it's important for you to understand that voter registration and voting records in elections are public record in Nebraska. So this information includes anybody can come in and sign an affidavit and get your name, address, phone number, email address, age, citizenship status, driver license number, partial Social Security number, birthplace, birth date, and party affiliation. And that's stated in 2 of our statutes. We already share this voting information with other states to eliminate duplicate voting. Secretary Gale has pledged to share only publicly available data on voter registrations. Finally, this resolution contains a serious error in the 3rd paragraph. 44 states and the District of Columbia have refused to provide only specific kinds of voter information to the Commission, such as Social Security numbers. Actually, the Commission Vice Chairman, Mr. Kobach, requested his request letter asked only for public voter information. Thus, every responding state declared that it could not provide Social Security numbers. Several states replied that birth dates and party affiliations are private and did not provide that. However, Alaska, Arizona, Georgia, and other states already have agreed to provide public voter information. Therefore, we urge commissioners to just vote no on the resolution, or to revise it to reflect support for the Gale decision to release only information protected by federal safeguards and in full compliance with state law. Thank you.
Any other comment? Please come up.
Good morning. My name is Susan Gum. My address is 9718 South 176th Avenue. And I would just like to say, in this day and age, I have no illusions that my personal information is really private anymore. And my concern is that we have fair and honest elections. And I think most citizens think that their vote is sacred, and they don't want it stolen or negated by someone who is not entitled to vote. Especially, we have tens of millions of illegal immigrants in our country today. While Nebraska may have a conscientious Secretary of State, we can't be assured that all the other states have as diligent a Secretary of State. And I am very concerned that dead people are voting, across the country. So how those people stay on the voting rolls, why they are on those rolls. And someone said the other day that their father died in Texas, but he has voted twice since his death. And I just believe that when people commit voter fraud, they should be held accountable and punished accordingly, because otherwise voter fraud will continue and could even become worse. Thank you.
Any other comment? Seeing none, there's a motion, a second on the floor. Clerk, ready?
Yep.
Please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioner Duda voting no. Note that Commissioner Morgan is not present and all other commissioners present voting yes.
Item G, Human Resources. The weekly personnel report from Civil Services is noted. No concerns there. Item 2, no legislative issues. And with that, we do have a need for an executive session for the purpose of personnel and litigation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's motion second to go into executive session for personnel and litigation. Please vote.
And then no committee meeting, we're done.
None that I know.
Out of here. During this period, go ahead.
Waiting on one vote. Commissioner Rogers.
You can. Oh, see.
Motion passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes, I'd just like to comment that yesterday, I believe it was, could have been Sunday, I've been so busy, Sunday, excuse me, I went out to the new American Muslim Institute Mosque built on the Tri-Faith campus. This was such a wonderful, wonderful experience. This is how we should be acting toward people all across the board. We are a nation that respects religious integrity. We're a nation that respects diversity of opinions. We're a nation that respects cooperative work where we get together. They're building a path between the three religions, not just figuratively, but also literally. They're building a path with what they call the Friendship Circle Bridge that goes from Temple Israel to the mosque to the Christian church. The concept and the Tri-Faith Community Conference Room bring all of us together where you can talk face to face, eyeball to eyeball, where you can discuss your differences in a civil manner, without bombs, without paint, without graffiti, without threats. Believe me, I'm Jewish. I'm sure most people know that. I have received numerous death threats while I was on the city council and while I've been on the county board. Most of them because I was Jewish. A few of them because I was proposing the smoking ordinance. I've had threats against my children, and I've had threats against my house and blowing up my business. You know, it's something we live with as politicians, especially when you're willing to take on controversial issues. But here in America, we really shouldn't have to put up with that any more than we should have to put up with voter fraud. Now, I don't mind eliminating voter fraud, but, as a matter of fact, I want to eliminate voter fraud, but the President's Commission is not the way to do it. Absolutely not. That, as I said, stinks of Big Brother. It stinks of big government. And I'm against both. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle, you were going to say something? Oh, okay. Then we're done. Thank you.
May I respond very quickly?
Motion passes. All present commissioners voting yes.